Hello and welcome back to Hoi 4 Equestria War. In today's episode, we played the Bears. Well, there's one other nation that had an update with the Bears and Bandits. The Free Territory of Adalert. Over 20 years ago, the Griffins of Adalert chased off their exploitative overlords. Murloc Wood and his merry forest brothers have kept the peace for thus long, but other interests believe they can do much better. How will you lead the Free Territory of Adalert? Alright. And yeah, that's our plan. 20 years after the revolution of outlaws, partisans, and old believers that liberated Adalert from the yoke of the Griffin Waldens and their Equestrian, I've got Equestria in the mind after the last playthrough, and Aquilian overlords, Adalert, and its green glades once again stand at the precipice of subjugation, beset by eternal strife and haunted by the impending return of its former sheriff. Hardened in his own 20 years of exile, the fractured coalition of zealots, believers, idealists, and merry griffs must become something more than just a bandit confederation held together by sheer force of will, or convince their citizens frequently fraternity transcends all boundaries after all. The only thing I know about this is I've looked at their focus tree for like a moment. And I also know that there's supposed to be like a secret path with the sheriff that isn't in the game yet. They just put it out without that. It has everything except this sheriff's secret path in it. So hopefully we'll get the sheriff's secret path at some point. But I'm not really worried about it. Whatever. I'll probably play it when it comes out though because, well, I'm trying to play most of like the secret paths that are big and known just because why not. In merry Adalert in the times of old, when the good counts of Goldenheart ruled the land, and where our tale begins, there lived within the green blades of Berglin, Eagleton, Wisson, Lissay, Vilston, and Hurlin, a people, noble, chivalrous, and jovial. It could never be said, however, that they were deferential to authority, and like a fury of arrows, authority came to turn their mirth into sorrow. Beset by the counts of Griffwald and the rising Aquilians to the south, the people of fair Adalert retreated into their sprawling forests and marshes, vowing to continue the struggle for their people's independence. It took them 300 years and a score more. All the while, Adalert remained under the control of vicious and greedy and craven griffins, the sheriff of Adalert, loyal solely to the coin of their Griffwaldian masters. For when the idle Boros was lost, when the discreet slipped from the rule of the empire, and Aquilia burned with revolutionary fervor, from the depths of the forest of Adalert, so too was sounded the song of the people. In 983, a small-time outlaw, bank robber, and opportunist by the name of Jan Rosen saw his personal protest against local taxation evolve into a nationwide movement against the Griffwaldian crown. Their aim evolving from simple, missable squabbles to the permanent end of Adalert subjugation. Sorry about that. Among the disparate band were two griffins, a simple Yeogriff turned outlaw, Murloc Wood, and a mysterious priest from deep within other woodlands, and the people's prelate, Luca Van Lisa. And though Rockin's movement was shattered and broken by the counts of Codlet, Luca, and Wood, were not so easily moved. By 987, the pair properly assumed control of the country, proclaiming the Free Territory of Adalert and guiding it to independence for the next 20 years. Their partisan coalition became something of a direct democracy, as councils, mercenary groups, revolutionary brigades, and cooperatives across the nation were tasked with forming a proper government for a reborn nation. Bandits grow old, and even nations scatter to the wind, but the people of Adalert remain. And now, upon the 20th anniversary of Adalert's renewed independence, are waiting to have their voices finally be heard, for good or for ill. Though Griffwaldian incursions may be a thing of the distant past, the sheriff still lurks, biding his time to see his fiefdom return to him. And his count and Adelart's own people are anything but united. Luca Van Lisa's old believers preach the gospel of Eri with an air of fire and brimstone. The revolutionaries that have arrived in droves to New Adalert preach of a religion of their own, proper socialist theory and praxis, not to mention all the flowing money and the burgeoning industry of that black gold, oil. We're in western Griffonia. The Griffonian West has traditionally had closer ties to Equestria due to its proximity. It has many natural harbors, and the interior is mostly hilly and densely forested, so population and development are concentrated near the coast. The majority of the populace consists of griffins, though the southwest has a significant pony minority that has integrated into local culture. Off the coast, there are the islands of Hockland, which lie near major transcontinental trade routes. For most of its history, the West was dominated by the Crown of Aquilia, albeit it was conquered by the Griffonian Empire, and after its collapse and independence, suffered from a republican revolution, counter-revolution, and subsequent decentralization. Now the kingdom is divided into many parts, all nominally under the rule of the king. North of the Aquilia is the Periphery, the frontier region of the kingdom, now ruled by many small statelets. To the northwest is the Skyfall Trade Federation, once the most prosperous spot of the empire, and now an independent nation and a naval powerhouse. And the island of Hockland are also independent, ruled by deserters, pirates, and other outlaws. Unlike in the empire, Aquilia's revolutions did not flee. They hid, and now they are preparing to strike again and topple the monarchy for good. The king and his vassals are trying their best to crush the uprising before it even begins, but things are unlikely to go as planned. While Aquilia is busy with internal issues, the small nations of the prairie seek to establish themselves as proper states, while clashing with each other. Eventually, Aquilia will go north and seek to reclaim its former territory, so they must prepare. Skyfall remains relatively stable, but their leader is very old and likely to pass away soon, forcing a change in power. The Hocklanders do as Hocklanders please, with no one to intervene in their affairs. However, the heartland of the Griffonia Empire is close, and the old superpower may yet recover its strength. Should this happen, the Empire will likely turn its gaze to the rich lands of the West. Aquilia has long hated the Empire, but hate alone will do nothing if they do not prepare themselves for the storm. Okay. If I was able to, just justify all of them, I'd be tempted to. Just because if I could just make it where they don't win their civil war against their subjects, that would be great. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that, but I'd love to just not have to deal with a fully powered them, because they are very annoying. I have failed many runs as the House of Avian and Flowina. I've done successful over here, but these guys are a little more difficult. Plus, with Skyfall, you could just straight up ally them if they go Republican. I mean, I meant to, read that after I did other things, but sure. "20 years of celebration. 20 years of freedom called for 20 days of celebration for the free and merry griffins of Adalert. Any incredulous planners for such a tall plan were swiftly reassured by Adelart's charming national hero, the one and only Murloc Wood, and soon the streets and squares of Burglen flocked with celebration. Griffins all over Adalert were beyond eager to join these grand festivities, and for 20 days straight was Burglen filled with fluttering party banners, scrumptious food, beautiful minstrel tunes, and cheers and drinks all around. For the peasants, local heroes, and every griffin in between, 20 years of freedom from the tyranny of Griffonia was more of a reason than any for such a grand celebration. Among the many partygoers came the many community leaders living throughout, traveling to Burglen, not only to celebrate, but also to represent their homes in Adelart's Congressional Assembly. Beyond the doors of Burglen's makeshift National Assembly Hall, long ago appropriated from its use as a Griffon court of injustice, community leaders and representatives from highly interested factions would meet for 20 days to debate and decide Adelart's future. Every Griff in Adalert knew that tensions with Griffwald were at an all-time high and would only grow no matter how much Adalert's population partied away. A course had to be decided soon, but the final decision would rest with Murloc Wood, the living legend who led Adalert to freedom, or at least it was widely believed so. Events across Griffonia had drawn in many new prominent groups over the last years, and most had packed a delegate or two in the year's assembly. It was looking to be a very divisive future for Adalert. Murloc Wood sat idly listening to the chatter throughout the court, adjusting his green bicotic on his head. The living legend reached for his pint and took a swig. Times have changed, Adalert, but we merry Griffs endure. So we'll go from volunteer only to limited subscription. We'll get stability. We'll go from civilian to early mode. Seems like things are going well. Let's learn a little about this Murloc Wood. Murloc Wood is called many things. Traitor, bandit, murderer, hero, protector, but none can deny that he is a revolutionary above all. Wood started his revolutionary career as a little-known partisan of the first Adelartian Revolution of 983, when Jan Rosen, a famed outlaw, first inspired the people of Adalert to break the shackles of both Griffwalder and Aquilian rule, and establish free independent territory. After Rosen found his rebellion crushed and himself beheaded, Wood took up the torch of the Adelartian revolutionaries, restructuring them among collectivist and fiercely anti-monarchist lines, with the promise of redistribution of wealth for the people and justice upon the corrupt nobles in each and every town they captured. Griffwald, controlled by a weak and ineffective count, was beset by an Adelartian revolution that gained most of their strongholds peacefully through the people's will. With Wood's revolutionary ideas at its helm, the sheriff, William Wendelot, failed to quell the revolt, with his own trusted griffins betraying him for the promise of wealth and freedom. He was beheaded soon after, and replaced by John D. Nortman, who reluctantly fled Adalert for good. Merlock began to reorganize the government upon liberation, and collectivist and populist lines, with particular fury directed towards Arcanets and the prelature of Griffwald, who suffered massive reprisals and murders at the claws of Wood's guerrilla armies. Fiercely anti-authoritarian attitudes among the revolutionaries, along with the hatred of what they believed was merit to corruption in the temples, led to Wood embracing the old believers, fringe religious sect, and shackling clause with the new elected prelate, Luca von Lisa. While Wood has ruled for 20 years with relative stability, the people are going restless. Hardliners clamor for Wood's removal and trial for banditry and mass murder and the establishment of true socialism, while moderates call for the end of the revolutionary period and the establishment of a real democracy. If Wood is to stay, only time will tell. Every township a voice. The customs and beliefs of each town are represented by its own unique code of laws. Convincing each town to follow countrywide decree is difficult, but the realm is kept stable and the populous field represented. Yeah, but political power minus political advisor cost, that's a lot of bad things for a little bit of stability. I'd say not worth it. Bandit governance. This is also not worth it. This is just pure negatives. Local and national governance is in the form of altruistic gangs where the self-interest of local communities and crew members is prioritized. The remaining wealthy citizens hide in fear, and the bandit population is keen on marching to war. This is some good things, though not being able to train units is pretty bad. The banditry in Adalert is checked by the romantic code of conduct, followed by the brigades follow. Theft is only permitted against the wealthy and abusive, and the self-determination of individuals must be respected. The hatred of monarchies and their sheriffs makes the bandits ready and willing to fight and work for the sovereignty of Adalert. However, their disdain for hierarchy makes ruling the populace difficult. Alright, some population stability in exchange for super goods. This is okay. The state takes no part in management of temples and religious organizations. Only corrupt and decadent temples of the three archons were raided in the past, and the meeting grounds of the old religion were never touched. Now the decaying faith of the three archons is being driven out by militaristic and revived old faith under Luca von Lisa and the sister of Eri. While the state stays out of the conflict, Luca von Lisa has been noted as a potential threat to stability due to her martial stance and hatred of socialism. Yeah, we're overall gaining very little political power because of all these minuses in political power, so not great. To 20 years of freedom. Though times are tough and the sheriff still tries to regain the power he once had. Though times are tough and the sheriff still tries to regain the power that he once had, Adalert remains free from tyranny. On this happy anniversary, we shall all celebrate our independence together, so long as nothing spoils the party, of course. 20 hours of argument. Great. Later that day, Merlock found himself nursing a mug at his favorite bar. With a sip, he tried to relax. The muffled drinking, debates, and merriment were familiar. It was like being on the hunt with the merry Griffs again. And it was the closest to being with them since Luca talked his ear off about not running off on his own and leaving Adalert leaderless. It made sense, but that didn't make him miss the merry Griffs any less. They missed him as well, but with Luca's suggestion, and the debates ringing true all around Adalert, he just couldn't join them on the raids. The situation was too tenuous. Something was gonna give, and when it did, he'd have to make the choices. Merlock was shaken from his thoughts by a shout coming from the counter nearby. Two griffins, one wearing a robe adorned with the symbol of Aerie, and the other having a pat symbol on his beret, were arguing about the spreading their doctrines in Lycée. Annoyed, Merlock stood up and walked over to them, tapping the pat exile on the shoulder. "Keep it down, gentle griffs," he said calmly. "They're making the beer taste better." "You're making the beer taste bitter, I mean." Both griffins nodded sheepishly, and Merlock returned to his seat. Merlock sat down with his head in his claws. If these arguments continued, they'd be stuck playing babysitter until someone went too far, and no Griff knew how long that'd take. Taking a sip from his drink, he put some thought into it. If any faction pulled something drastic while unsupported, it'd be politically disastrous for them. But if he was behind one of them, that could work. He'd have to call a meeting with the delegates, which would be a worse headache than after the celebrations, but it could be a way out of this mess and a way to get the delegates off his back. With a determined nod, Murloc finished his drink. It'd be a rough few weeks, so he may as well take what joy he could get for now. Oh good, -5 stability. Great. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Do I have, no, I don't even get a unique place. Great, thanks. Man, I don't even get to read building lore. Boo! I'm joking. The video that worked on this is watching. I'm joking. The rights of petition. Petitions! 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 They never end. Murloc stared at the end of the Congress Hall as the voices of griffins yelled above one another. Vanguards, Airites, mercenaries, business griff, reformers, republicans, peasants, they never stopped yelling at one another. Even his fellow band of merry griffs, honest and loyal folks who always listened to Murloc's command, devolved into tempest of insults at the Adelartians they had once fought for. When did it get this bad? Murloc ruminated. He remembered the day several years ago that he and Luca agreed to the system petitions. Wait for all the voices to be heard, equal and without prejudice. It was an ideal system for both he and the prelate agreed on. And now the prelate was yelling at him as well. Murloc gazed at his old friend, eyes full of rage as his beak directed demands at Wood. The words were overshadowed by every other voice in the hall, but the sting hit harder than any other insult he heard. When would it end? Murloc put his head into his claws and sighed. Exhaustion became his center being, a state that veiled the world in a shade of gray. If only he could go out with his merry griffs and fight the sheriff once more, be a symbol of hope and peace in a country invested into darkness. He'd give anything to go back to those days once more. But no, he had a place to be, a position to be in. He had to be the voice of reason in these arguments. He was no longer a merry griff, nor a hero protecting the common griff from the bad guy, but a judge in the world of gray. A world where good and bad no longer existed. He was just another sheriff, and thus the petitions go on. -50 political power, -3 harmony. Great, that's exactly what I was hoping for. These seem like celebration days. You said 20 days celebration. This doesn't feel like celebration. Like, can I get some happy celebrate? Like, yeah, 20 days of celebration. Hopefully this event's good and not lying to me. Right? You said, like... Oh, that's the event I got at the beginning, so I'm not gonna get... Great. Well... Who do I start with? I also don't know how to get any of these paths. Like, I don't know, like, what sends me down what path at all. I'll have to figure that out, because I mean, I think it might just end up being luck. I kind of want charging course together. I kind of want to go together on this. Like, I think it would be interesting to work. Now, that's a pretty moderate path, so it's not going to be very crazy. I believe this one has a good amount of conquest. That one's the free territory. I think is staying with him, which I would be down for. I might just try to keep with him, though again, I don't actually know how to do that. This one's just becoming the Third Aquilian Republic, which is interesting. So the Oil Republic's just like we're Aquilia now. That's a interesting way of doing it. Yeah, that's a very strange way of doing it. Let's just become Aquilia. I think I'm gonna start with, well, let's see. Alright, that gives me some mill. Alright. I'm just trying to figure out what path to go down, because I don't actually know, like, any of this. I'm gonna start with Floean petition. John D. Corn is a curious character. He's perhaps the only Floean interested in Adalert, yet he seems to be no more outlandish than the average business griff from that deplorable city of Banks. His interest in that of his investors is certainly strange, but if he can benefit our little statelet, then perhaps Wood would do well to hear his petition. An unexpected petitioner. Wood sighed once he reached the back of the Congress building. He nearly collapsed against the wall, stained with years of misuse and reuse. It was like Mayor himself possessed the griffins in the hall the moment they walked to the threshold. Murloc Wood, the legend, a smooth, dedalus voice, spoke from behind. Wood spun around at the sound and put one of his claws in his flintlock. Before him stood a clean-cut, handsome griffin, with a dark gray suit so clean it felt alien compared to the mildew-ridden wall and the gravel path they stood on. J.M. D. Carnard, and the richest griffin Adalert. Wood let go of his gun, but kept his piercing gaze on the griffin. Jam chuckled and held his talons. Relax, Merlock. I came in peace. I'm just here to talk. If you want to talk, you can do it in the hall, Merlock responded, tilting his head towards the Congress building. Talk? Descartes gasped out through a chuckle. You call that talking in there? If that's talking, then what we're doing right now is a whisper. No, nothing I can say will be heard if I speak in there. Wood couldn't find himself disagreeing. What do you want, D. Conard? Jim walked closer. What every griff wants, a better Adalert. I just don't think screaming gets my point across, like the Aquilian commie or that old fart. They just want to be heard, Wood replied. The Conard snorted. The Vanguard doesn't want to be heard. It wants to be in charge. And the Prelate isn't any better. Didn't you work together against Griffwald? What gives him the right to treat you like that in there? Merlock squeezed his left claw into a fist. Then what do you think will help? The oil griffin grinned as he straightened out his suit. Gold. I know griffins in Floena, influential griffins who want to change Adalert into something else. They wouldn't mind loaning some Floens and to transform this backyard of Aquilia into a country that can stand on its own. We'll build factories, feed griffins, and make this place a true republic. Jane put his surprisingly cold talon on Murlock's shoulder and whispered, Relive your old dreams, Merlock, with my help. The legend looked into D. Conrad's eyes and opened his beak. Tell me more, or leave, Jamie. So this will increase our dependence. So we can increase our dependence, but get some nice buffs. Or we could just do the outlaw economy, allowing us to raid. I want to raid. Leave. I'm doing raids. I think raids will be very useful. The outlaw economy. Whilst we Adalertians are a noble people, we are no strangers to taking what we need by force. It was Wood who popularized the practice of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, and our neighbors are, relatively speaking, very rich indeed. We're sure that they'll forgive us for these raids. Eventually. Hopefully I could get enough reinforcements to actually have these, like, be able to raid. A flight from Forum of Falcontown. Count, I implore you, please reconsider, Jane began, only to stop himself, as Count Clodent held up his town and to silence him. I cannot say I've made this decision lightly, Sheriff, the Count began, glaring regally down at him, but our resources alongside our patience are limited. We have provided you with good soldiers, better idols, and more faith than you have earned. The Count's harsh eyes softened as he leaned towards the Sheriff. Jean, it's over. I've done all I can for you, and Boris, as my witness, I wish I could have done more. But I can't help you anymore. The leeches have made sure of that. A moment of silence, as neither Griff were willing to meet the other's eyes. With a cough, the Count returned to his harsh glare, though he spoke with a more forced tone. In the eternal benevolence of the Count dynasty and her supporters, we shall grant you one final chance to claim our prize. Return to us with Adalert in hand, or do not return at all. With a wave of his claw, the Count bid the Sheriff adieu for the final time. They'll see when I deliver Eagleton to them on a silver platter. Not happening. Genuinely can't happen. Sadly enough for you. Genuinely not possible. Not currently, at least. Crack open the revolutionary stores. Though they're plenty dusty and very outdated by now, some relics of the Independence War still exist, stored in strategically positioned caches around the country. They're not the best, but they'll serve us now as well as they would done a decade ago. At least as long as we keep them well maintained, that's probably a little much to ask of bandits, though. Putting names to faces. Coming across a map of Adalert nowadays was rare. With small communes across the state and fluid borders with most of its neighbors, the best a normal Griff would have to hand would be woefully outdated by the time the ink dried. However, the Sheriff still had plenty of old allies living within Adalert, and with a few idols from his personal coffers, he now had a mostly up-to-date map of the land. Though it didn't clear much up in the end, knowing who was where was one thing. Understanding how in Boris' name they weren't killing each other was another. Jean, his focus broke as Van Kirk, one of his more rowdy stalwarts, snapped his talons in front of his eyes. Are you going to stare at a hole through that map all evening, or are you going to listen to the griffins you sent into that blasted place? She leered up at him, as an agreement murmur broke out from the rest of his gathered advisors. The latter, Miss Krug. Please continue, and perhaps you can help make this rotten joke of a state make any sense to me. He lightly nudged her head away as she huffed and walked back to the makeshift stage. He tried to listen, as though they were only able to glean limited information on each faction. Every scrap of knowledge they could extract about Adalert would be vital, but the makeup of Adalert felt off. The lines thought to be drawn in the forests and towns were too blurry to be merely ideological. I find it hard to believe these griffins actually get along. They don't. But, it's fine. But I think for now, this is a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.